so much for coming out this evening. So good to see you all. I'm Brandy Bourne, the University Librarian here, UNC Asheville. I really want to thank Sam Kaplan for putting together this event and for being such a champion for our archives over the years, and a champion in general. So, thank you so much for all that the Center for Jewish Studies has done for the archives, building this incredible collection. And the collection is a living thing. We see it every day, used in particular by our students. It sparks incredible research that sends them on paths into adulthood. It brings researchers from around the nation, and it continues to grow because individuals and families take the time to preserve and share their archival stories. And we take that trust that's placed in us so seriously, and we're so honored by it. I want to go ahead and introduce our incredible, passionate steward of the collection, our brilliant university archivist and historian, Ashley Whittle. Thank you all so much.
I unfortunately am not as good of a speaker as Brandy is, so I have a script to work off of. So friends, colleagues, historians, thank you for coming to Special Collections tonight to talk about history. My name's Ashley Whittle. I'm the Director for Special Collections. I'm the University Archivist. I'm the Assistant Archivist, which is my old position, and I also adjunct for the History Department. Throwing this out at you, Shannon. Many hats here. This is an Appalachian archive. It has been since its founding in 1977 as the Southern Highlands Research Center. However, when people hear the word Appalachian Archive, they often think of coal mining collections or the recordings of a clawhammer banjo. I heard that laugh. Or the documentation of families who've lived in the same holler for 5 generations. And you know what? They're both right and they're wrong. This particular Appalachian Archive invites researchers to look a little bit closer. Our collections include materials about African American photographers from the 50s and 60s, a YWCA collection that documents desegregation in Asheville, a scrapbook of one of Asheville's most famous women environmentalists, and a collection which includes some of the rarest Cherokee writings ever recorded. Yet this archive also includes collections of families who survived the Holocaust, Jewish business leaders, synagogue members, Jewish oral histories that chronicle their exodus from Europe to this area. Jewish history is not exclusively urban. It's not just confined to the Lower East Side of New York or the suburbs of Chicago. In the early 20th century, the Appalachian Mountains became home to thousands of Jewish immigrants seeking refuge in these hollers and hills, bringing with them a unique culture of trade, of faith, of community that has become fully intertwined with the mountain landscape here. So why is it important for an Appalachian archive to have Jewish collections? Ultimately, it's because they make us stop to think about what Appalachian history really is, what makes up its very foundations. These are histories of people who carved out a middle-class existence for themselves, who helped others build one in a world that was often defined by a strict 2-tiered class structure. They often found common ground with their neighbors, while simultaneously enduring the unique, sometimes painful experience of being an ethnic religious minority in what was long thought of as a very homogeneous region. Without these collections, our story of industrial expansion, of small town commerce, of the development of our main streets is incomplete. Secondly, these collections showcase a beautiful and often surprising cultural intersection. The fundamental makeup of Appalachia is unique. Jewish residents added a distinct layer to it through their own daily lives. When we archive the personal papers of a woman whose family was intimately touched by the horrors of the Holocaust, we digitize the oral history of a synagogue sisterhood in Asheville, we're not just preserving Jewish history, we're preserving the history of Appalachian diversity and resilience. So then why, with these very important collections, why should they be housed here at the archives at UNC Asheville? Because it's a matter of integrity. Yes, they could be absorbed into one of the larger national institutions, but this archive serves as an anchor for both the community memory of this university, of Asheville, and Southern Appalachia. Our Jewish collections act as a harbor for small communities that continue to ebb and flow in the tides of time. As one Jewish Appalachian resident noted, there's so few of us here, and it's gotten fewer and fewer. So the keeping of these collections, the archiving of these community stories has become even more important. These collections ensure that the dedicated Jewish communities that help shape Appalachia are not forgotten and that they continue to be used to teach the next generation. By supporting, promoting the Jewish collections, by supporting this archive, we affirm that the story of the mountains is not just the folks sitting in the porch rocking chair, but of a story that is also about the shopkeeper on Main Street, the merchant in the lumber camp, the family seeking a new life in the misty blue mountains of Appalachia. I gotta wrap this up now and introduce Sharon. You will forgive me when I rush you all out of here a little after 7 o'clock tonight. I have a 5-year-old little girl at home who will not go to bed without a goodnight kiss from Mama and a Berenstain Bears book. It's so nice to see everybody here tonight celebrating such an important part of Appalachian history. To document the Jewish experience in Appalachia, that is to embrace a more nuanced, a more inclusive understanding of the history of our region. It reminds us that Appalachia has always been a place of diversity, a mosaic of cultures, of faiths, of journeys. I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. I'm going to introduce my very good friend and fellow historian, Sharon Farr. For the last 25 years, Sharon Farr has been documenting Western North Carolina history through oral history interviews and by gathering related materials which have deeply enriched our archives, including subjects such as Jewish history and the Holocaust. Asheville's Jewish history was long ignored and undocumented until Sharon and Jan Shockett founded History at Hand in the early 2000s. When Jan moved away from Asheville, Sharon continued to document local sites related to the Jewish community, the Black community, Montford, and other important sites, creating interpretive history panels at significant locations so people can stand where history happened. Today, our collection, Jewish Life in Western North Carolina, is highly regarded among researchers for its rich primary sources. That's thanks to Sharon and other community members, several of whom are here tonight. I also want to mention, Sharon and I knew each other prior to my coming here to UNC Asheville. We've known each other for actually about 20 or 25 years now. In another life, I worked as a nurse for more than a decade. I spent the majority of those years working for Dr. Robert Klein here in Asheville. I met Sharon and her mother through my work there. She's become a very good friend to me, almost family. When my daughter was born in 2021, she was the very first person to give me a handmade crocheted gift for her that I still have, and that I intend to pass along to her. So if she has children and grandchildren, she can pass it along to them. She's very, very dear to me, and I am very honored to introduce her to you tonight. So without further ado, I give you Sharon Farr.
Tonight we're going to interview two very special people who have collections here, Babs Bloomberg and Paul Michaelov. So, Babs, tell us when your family came to Asheville.
Okay, my grandfather and his brother originally were in Lincolnville, Lithuania, I think it's Lincolnville, and they went to Savannah because we had filmed a family there. And then they came up to Asheville where they were peddlers. I think that was in 1887. And I don't know how they got around being peddlers because my grandfather had such a really heavy accent. It was like, I can remember him in a chair, I was very small, and he would say, I'm Russian, like that. So going around the mountain people, trying to talk to them, I mean, it must have been an incredible thing, but they did. And they eventually settled down in Asheville and opened a store, just kind of a general store for everybody. And so that was 1867.
No, that's
1987, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Right.
It's okay.
Yeah.
And we have a story of him, he couldn't pay rent for a house and the store, so he just slept in the
He
store.
slept in the store.
Yeah, we have a first-hand account and it's in the archives.
Yeah, and there's also somebody else who slept in the store. There was this man who came down from New York. He was a dancer and he wanted to open up a studio. So my grandfather let him sleep in the back of the store for dancing lessons, and that man became Arthur Murray, who had his studio over a building that my father had. And that was
I don't think your microphone's
a
on.
while ago.
Why don't you just pass the one mic back and forth?
Okay.
Oh, is this, it's on?
It has to be very close to be
How's
effective.
that? How's that better?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so where were we?
So, that was your grandfather. Now talk a little bit about your father, what he did.
Okay, my father, he was the youngest of 5 children, and he was kind of, grew up kind of like a wild child. He,
Can you all hear?
can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, he always had, like, when he was 16, they sent him away to military schools for some discipline in Stamford, Connecticut, but he left that school and he went to New York City and drove a cab. He just ran away. And he was always afraid that he would run into one of his uncles getting into his cab who lived in New York. And he said he slept in Grand Central Station and he was kind of a character. Then he came back to Asheville and it was either the high school principal or his father saying, Harry, you've got wheels in your head. You might as well quit school, which he did. And he and this other man, Clarence Sluter, opened up a filling station at the corner of Walnut and Market Street. North Market Street, and which it was one of the first filling stations here. And he was 19, and then eventually he built another building called Harry's Motor Inn on the property that Julia Wolfe had her boarding house, and he paid her rent. And I can remember he said he would go up there, and she was very parsimonious, so he would go up there, and he said that it was so cold, she would put one piece of coal on their furnace, and he said it was damn near frozen there with her. Anyhow, so he built this building where the visitor center is now, where the Thomas Wolfe Memorial is now. That was called Harry's Motor Inn. And the reason he built it was because there were a lot of cars, a lot of tourists, and people would have their cars, the roofs cut open and everything. So he wanted a place where they could park their cars for 24 hours. So at one point, Julia Wolfe lost her money around 1930, and they were going to tear down the boarding house, my father's place of business, and make that whole area a vegetable garden for the community. And my father bought the boarding house and then the property, and then sold the boarding house back to Julia. And there's a story that Julia had a son, Fred, who had a bad stutter. And he went to sell the house back, and Fred would say, now, Harry, I know how you Jews do business. Now, I'm not going to pay you anything, but I'm going to give you just maybe $7,000, and that's it, because I know how you Jews are. And Daddy said, okay, fine. So he shook hands on it, came out, and then he said, Fred, I was only going to ask you half of what you were going to give me, but you went on and on about the Jews, so I just shut up. But then he did that, and then eventually he had a place of business on Haywood Street called Harry's Cadillac, and across the street, Harry's Motor Inn, which is now the library, number 2, yeah, which is now the library. And Harry's Cadillac became the pit of despair, downtown, that gravel pit. Okay, that's where that was. And then eventually, he had several places around the city. Then eventually, he went out to Patton Avenue and built Harry's on the Hill, which is still being run by the family, by my niece Pat Grimes, is very involved in that. So Daddy started a business in 1923, so it's been there's been a Harry's for 103 years, which is pretty cool.
Wow.
And he also purchased what is now Grovewood Village, and it was originally Biltmore Homespun, right next to Grove Park Inn. And my niece Lynn is involved with that. So we're a family business, and we all now run by women, which is interesting. And
But not started by, I mean, it was really a man's business.
it was a man's business.
When it started, this was a man's business,
yeah.
the
Oh, yeah.
automobile business.
Yeah, it was, it definitely was. So, and then, several years ago, they had a surprise luncheon for my father where they presented him with his high school diploma. So, he didn't go to school, he had wheels in his head, but he got his diploma.
And how old was he?
Oh, God, he
Well,
must have been
how old was he when he passed away?
89. So this happened when he was about in his 60s.
He was born in 1904,
Correct,
so
yeah.
he lived
Yeah.
a good long life in Asheville.
Oh, yeah. And the reason I took a place in Asheville, I lived in New York most of my life, although I was born here, because I didn't want there were 4 Bloombergs in the phone book, and I didn't want the name to disappear. So I was here, and I kept, because I wanted the name to stay in the phone book. Of course, we don't have phone books anymore. But I'm the last one, with that name. So it's kind of sad, yeah. And my sister and I used to joke that we knew more people in the cemetery than we did in the temple. And my grandfather, he was one of the founders of Temple Beth Hatafillah, the Reform temple here in town.
So why is it important to you to have your family ephemera in the archives?
For recognition and for memory. I mean, there were so many businesses here, Jewish businesses, as you well know, because you did that wonderful book. But it's just like there's nobody who really knows the history, of what happened here in the early 1800s or late 1800s. And it's important. It's important to have the archives, and that's why when I found out that you were doing this, it was just so fantastic. And like I say, Sharon knows more about it than I do.
Do you want to say anything about Biltmore Industries?
Oh, yeah, I don't know if you all know where Grovewood is, Grovewood Gallery. There's an antique car museum there. Okay, my father, we had a play, Biltmore Industries, of course, started on the Vanderbilt estate, and she had to sell it to Fred Steely, who was the architect of Grove Park Inn, because when George died, she didn't have any money, believe it or not. But so he ran Biltmore Homespun, which was hand-woven homespun for years, and then that kind of went out of fashion. And Fred Steely Jr., his son, wanted to sell the place, or they were going to tear it down or something. And Daddy went over to get a table for his lake house. And when he was there, he saw a still, and he said, "Fred, how much do you want for the still?" And Fred said, "Well, Harry, I can't sell you the still, but I can sell you the whole place." So again, on the strength of a handshake, he bought Biltmore, what was Biltmore Homespun, and ran it kind of as a tourist attraction for a long time. And then in 1992, my brother-in-law, Buddy Patton, had this vision of making an artist village. So a craft village. So he did with artist studios, and one of our studio people was over there, Carl Powell, a glass artist. And Daddy had an antique car collection, so we had an antique car museum there, and that's his connection with Biltmore Industries, which is now called Grovewood Village.
Thank
So,
you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Are we doing any questions or?
I think we're just gonna
Okay.
cycle out.
Okay.
Keep going. That's it. Okay. Thank you for listening.
Okay, so these are the go-to people if you want to know about, people who used to live here. And here we have Dr. Paul Michaelov. So Paul, tell us when your family came here.
my grandfather's brother,
Closer.
my grandfather's brother S.H. lived in the same town or near town as Babs, and he came to Knoxville in 1898. And in 1899, he wanted to bring a wife from Europe, and he didn't think it was good to be in business against his people he knew in Knoxville. So he rode a horse from Knoxville to Asheville because of the Bloombergs, because that's somebody he knew here. And he pedaled. In those days, there was a company up north that would give immigrants a pack and merchandise and credit to go pedal. And my father's father would walk from Asheville to Green River, past Hendersonville. And if he had a good week, he'd ride the train back. If he had a bad week, he'd walk back. And Uncle S.H. was very smart. He learned English with no accent. He was one of these geniuses. He was a small man, but just brilliant guy. And after that, he opened a store here. But he brought, I told him my grandfather was one of 8 brothers, 6 brothers and 3 sisters. And one of the brothers went to Stockholm, Sweden and stayed there. And everybody else came. Uncle S.H. brought one at a time. And my grandfather came January 5th, 1905 with my grandmother, my father, and there were 3 sons, 1 daughter from age 9 down to 4. And so that's how they got here. And same thing, my grandfather apparently got the same credit, the same backpack, and walked. My grandfather, pedaling all the way to South Carolina and back, and he ended up with a store. So that's how they ended up here.
So what did the later generations do?
Later generations did a lot. Things that, from a first generation, to begin with, it ended up that there were 5 brothers and 3 sisters that all came to Asheville. So right away, that was a lot of people. And right away, a lot of them got married, and, there would be nothing unusual to have 20, 30, 40 Michelovs. And we had a family reunion here in 1982 or so, and 116 showed up. And so quite a few of us. So what some of them did, some did business, some like the Perlmans went into the furniture business, and there were 3 families of that, Canes, Kalins, Furniture. Between here and Florida, they had a very large furniture organization. Uncle S.H., one of his sons was one of the 3 founders of 20th Century Fox. And there were 3 Bill Michelovs, because we name after deceased relatives. And my grandfather's father came here to visit in 1899. He was 57 years old, and most of the family was still in Lithuania, and he died here. He's buried at Riverside in 1899. So 3 of them named, his name was William Wolfe Michelov. 3 of them named their sons Bill. So we got 3 Bill Michelovs. So at any rate, one Bill Michelov was one of the 3 founders of 20th Century Fox. He had all the Fox movies in Australia. He had I didn't even know it, Sharon told me, he had the first drive-in movie probably in the country here in Asheville.
I think it was a different one. But
Different
close
one?
enough.
Okay, close enough. All right. Also, he had the only movie for blacks in Asheville. The consortium here of movie people didn't believe in it, but Uncle S.H. owned a piece of land where the Fox Theater is on Biltmore Avenue, and they let him open a movie for blacks if they came in the back door. So that's one of the things, but he did real well in that. And let me see, I made notes. Groceries, okay. There was Michelov Grocery, and that's Skip and Lowell Perlman's grandfather. And that was good. Furniture, they were really big in. There were a lot of retail stores.
IXL.
IXL, okay. SH, he excelled in everything. When he opened a business here. He ran a big thing that anybody that could name his store, he would give them the finest set of china, period. So this went on and on and on. The address of the store was I excelled, and also he excelled in everything. But
It's IXL.
capital. And that's what he named his store, and he gave this lady, all the china and so forth, and he probably had that in mind anyway, and he stayed in business here another 50 years. And who else?
The mayors.
Okay, the mayors. Okay, Ken Michaelov, who's cousin, and Ken's a few years older than me. First of all, he was city manager for 16 years. Then I was on city council, and he became mayor here. At the same time, our cousin Don Michaelov in Hendersonville became mayor for 15 years in Hendersonville. So we had all those mayors, and don't talk about it, but I had a half brother whose wife was vice mayor of Forest City, North Carolina at the same time. So we had a lot of Michaelovs as mayors, and they did a real good job. There was a lot of corruption in politics in Asheville and Hendersonville in those days, and they stopped every bit of the corruption.
You know the Ku Klux Klan?
Okay, the Ku Klux Klan, and I hate to start with this one. My dad lived in Forest City, head of the Ku Klux, and Uncle S.H. was this gentle, mild man. Most of the rest of the family, I look like my mother's family, the rest were pretty big, stocky guys. I mean, they took care of the rest of, nobody came to the shul there to the synagogue to bother, because there were enough Michaelovs. So my dad moves next door in Forest City. Okay, and what?
The permit, when the Ku Klux Klan wanted to.
Oh, I thought, two stories on the Klan. First Klan, my dad lived next door to the Klan in Forest City. The guy came over, no Jew could live next to him. My dad beat him till he was almost dead. Really, almost dead. A month later, the whole Klan came over, brought my dad a written membership to the Ku Klux Klan. And when he lived in Forest City, he'd go play cards with them, drink with them. Nobody bothered another Jew there. Okay, Ku Klux Klan, Asheville. They came to Asheville and Hendersonville to get building permits at the same time. Ken was mayor, Don was mayor. And both Don and Ken had to give them permits. There was reason not to, but they also made sure they were totally harassed as they walked through Asheville, as they walked through Hendersonville. And they went on the news and said they weren't coming back. There were too many mayors named Michaelov. So, and that wasn't that many years ago. Well, 25 years ago, maybe.
So when you go around Asheville, what evidence do you see of your family?
All over, we see stores. There were the furniture stores that were Perlman's. Up and down Biltmore Avenue, there was all little Jewish stores, and they would have minions, services every day together. And there were a lot of stores there, but there were just Jewish stores everywhere, and they're not there anymore. Apparently, our ancestors were smart. They had us become lawyers and doctors and Indian chiefs, instead of merchants. But there were a lot of merchant stores there. And what else?
Well, why do you think the archives are important?
I think they're real important, especially big families like ours. They don't live here anymore. And they come and they can find pictures of relatives, they can find history, and it's something that, each family, if they keep their own things, it just goes away. And put together like this, it'll be here for anybody who wants to see it for a long, long time.
Okay, you have anything else you think
I don't know, I made some
we
notes.
want to say? That's a lot of notes. We only have 5 more minutes.
I'll talk to you about a wolf. They lived, near your family, my grandmother. And she had a boarding house near there. And Wolf would sell her apples for the boarding house. And also in his book, Look Homeward Angel, he talked about Mrs. Michaelov's boarding house. My father's next brother, Sam, was one of the best looking men ever lived. He was like a movie star. And Thomas Wolfe called him pretty boy Michael Love. And he wasn't a pretty boy, he was a real handsome man. And also my father's name was Isaac Yitzhak, but when he came here, he said he gave that back and he named himself Jack. But one of the people in Wolfe's book was Jack Isaacs, who I assume, you know, but they lived like several doors apart, like the Bloombergs, and they all knew each other. Yeah. And Fred Perlman's cousin, Fred Wolfe, who you're talking about, used to come to my mother's little store and visit. So they all knew a lot of people.
Yeah, my daddy's, my father's backyard in the Wolf home, not the boarding house. The backyards were adjacent, and my aunt said that my grandmother, like Tom, would be running around like a little ragamuffin, and my grandmother would bring him in to bathe him.
Wow.
The family home was where the YMCA is, in that parking lot. There's even a plaque there that says that was the location of the Wolf's house.
Yeah.
Is there anything else I'm thinking about? Barbara, you got any ideas? Did I leave anything out?
I think you did a good job.
Well, anybody have any questions? Because everything I said is probably pretty close to right. You know, it's hard to know. It's hard to know. Because, you know, we're not told everything every time. Oh, and Bill Michael Love, Ken's dad was, I don't know if I mentioned this.
Civil service.
Yeah, he was the first head of civil service in Asheville. And he helped the police department a lot, and he helped the fire department a lot. And he was extremely well liked by the police. Matter of fact, he had a daughter who had a terrible accident at St. Genevieve School. You know, she stuck her head out the school bus, hit a telephone pole and killed her. And that Bill, they called him Uncle SH's Bill. My dad's brother was Big Bill because he was big, and there was another Little Bill. But the police sent all the way from where he was in, I don't know if he was in DC or Virginia, but he had an escort of police totally all the way from there to Asheville when his daughter was killed. And that was, so he was, yeah, Barb.
I'm not a part of this program, but you might want to mention the garbage strike.
Oh, the garbage strike. When Ken was mayor here, the garbage collectors in Asheville went on strike. And they were on strike a week or two. This was on national news. Ken had every white-collar employee in the city hall collect garbage. And he drove the first truck. And they gave him a ticket immediately. He didn't have a chauffeur's license. and he paid it, but he had everybody in City Hall collecting garbage. And the next day the strike was over. And it was on national news. I'd forgotten that. Which is pretty smart.
Yeah.
And anything else?
I think you did a good job.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Sharon, and Babs and Paul for all of that. And I'll say more things in just a little bit. I did want to move on to the next item related to the archives, which is an effort to not just maintain archives and publicize the archives, but to continue keeping them connected to the community. And to that end, there are two teachers from Buncombe County Schools who've started on a project to go through the archives. They'll be spending time here this summer, and they'll tell you more about that in a minute, to find points of contact between the North Carolina standard course of study and material in our archives with the intention of bringing that material to the classroom in Buncombe County Schools. So I wanted to introduce Susan, Rana, and Catherine Pointer from Buncombe County Schools, who have stepped up to take on that task. Do you want to go first? Okay. So Susan, Rana.
You'll have to forgive me if I've got any brain fog, because I have been teaching 7th graders all day, and that's no joke. But I wanted to thank you, first of all. The two speakers and anyone else involved in sharing their families' stories in this way. And when you were asked why you thought it was important, I immediately knew the answer as to why it's important. I've been teaching, this is year 21 in the public schools, and I was a teacher for 13 years in the arts before that. And I started teaching in New York, in Brooklyn. And when I was doing my graduate work there at Hunter College, I was amazed at the things I learned that I didn't learn in school. I had never heard of the Japanese internment camps, for example. Never been taught that. But you know, that was the 70s and 80s, and we relied very heavily on textbooks then, and textbooks can be a biased source of information, and there were things that we just didn't learn. That being said, as I started teaching World War II and Holocaust again this year, because I've taught it many times, I had stepped away from teaching it for a few years, and so I attended a workshop because I wanted to know if there had been any changes in methodology and how we approach this instruction. And I was pleasantly surprised to learn that there had been lots of changes. I think a lot of instruction in the past was just centered on the Holocaust, and that's pretty much all students learned about a Jewish community. They didn't know anything else about it, about you all and your families and what they've done. And so I've used to begin, and there's some little flyers that went around for a culminating project that I'm still working on. But I began the unit with some resources through a free online curriculum that can be used called Echoes and Reflections, which I highly recommend you go check out Echoes and Reflections. And so the unit began with not the Holocaust, but pre-war Jewish life. And they learned first who these people were that we were about to study. And this is done all through primary source materials. So lots of survivor testimonies, reading them, watching videos, and reflecting on those primary sources. And these seventh graders, as bonkers as they can be, immediately recognized and voiced to me how much more they understood about this topic in history because they were hearing it from primary sources, right? And I wasn't just printing up texts that I found online. They were hearing firsthand accounts being told in first person. And after we were listening to some of these stories of pre-war Jewish life, many of them unprompted were able to just say, well, they sound amazing. They were very educated, and she was talking about going to the opera with her family. And, you know, it was such a richer experience for them. And so these archives, what they're going to do now is bring the world closer for the kids. Like, I think one of the most valuable lessons my own father taught me was to live outside of yourself. Yeah, and so they learned about people from a long time ago, and then we've traveled through this literally watching their worlds get smaller, right? The map just closing in on ghettos. And I'm excited after that, and after they've processed that, to be able to look at, and again, in years past, they would learn about the Holocaust, end of unit, take a test. You learned about the Holocaust. But now, what happened after that, right? Where did the survivors go? And that can be approached many different ways, and I've got plenty of primary sources through echoes and reflections. But for the primary sources to come from their own community, for them to be able to see that as the world got smaller and smaller and smaller, for many people, that the push-pull factors that we talk about in social studies brought many people here. And if, like for young people, the community is part of what shapes who they are. And I think for them to be able to see that part of their community is made up of the relatives of survivors that came here, they will hopefully be able to live outside of themselves, as my father always advised me, and see that their story is made up of your stories. And it's so in particular, when you said, you were asked why you thought they were important or why you wanted to include your family's things, you said so that they're remembered, our memory. And they will be, because you've shared these with them. So thank you so much. And I'm middle school, she's high school. But you can see what I'm planning to do with middle schoolers. And she will be doing something much more advanced, probably. Yeah. But again, thank you, and I'm excited to start diving into these. Also, I never knew it was pronounced archivist.
I am Catherine Pointer. I teach junior year English at AC Reynolds High School here in Asheville. And for the first time next year, I will be... Thank you. I'll be teaching a Holocaust and Genocide elective course at Reynolds, which I'm very excited and passionate about teaching. And as you know, state legislation has required teachers from 6th grade all the way to 12th grade in English, language arts, and social studies to at least touch on the Holocaust and genocide. And I think that it's so important, just like Susan was saying, that we don't focus all of our attention just on here's this horrendous, horrible experience, but let's look at the people today. Let's look at the part of our community today, Jewish life and the vibrancy of it that has been around for centuries, and we have here in our own community. And I think that's really important. So that students don't just see the Jewish community as being associated with one event, and not as victims, right? But as human beings living, their experience and their lives out here. For instance, I had a student a couple of years ago who I just adore, and she looked at me when we had our unit, and she said, "Did you know that I'm Jewish?" And I said, "Well, I didn't know that you were Jewish." And she said, "Yes, in my family, my great-grandfather had one of the first businesses here in Asheville. His last name was Lipinski, and there's a building named for him at UNC Asheville." As an outsider who had just moved here, I'd probably been living here for 2 years, I had no clue. I didn't know. So that really opened my mind to the fact that we really need to bring these community experiences in and make them a part of our lessons. And I think it's especially important with the new class that I'm going to be teaching, the Holocaust and Genocide Studies, that my students first understand that there's a very vibrant community that exists today, and especially here in Asheville and in Western North Carolina. This archive is going to be so important to that. And I'm so excited to be linking the North Carolina State Standards in social studies and English to these archives so that teachers can have a list. I think Dr. Kaplan said we're going to have a list that we can give to teachers so they can see, oh, I can tie, these letters to this state standard and include it in my lessons. So it makes that an easily digestible source. They don't have to go through lots of research. It's been done for them. Of course, if they want to do some more, they're welcome to. But it also allows them to know that this archives exists. And I, for one, was not aware before Dr. Kaplan had contacted us. And I think that's sort of shameful that I didn't know that. And I think it would benefit our students and our teachers so much to be able to use these resources in our lessons. And I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
And I wanted to be sure to introduce Lily Kai. If you could stand up, Lily, and wave. Lily is a student intern who's been supporting with the archive this year and will be supporting these two teachers over the summer. And I really appreciate all your work, Lily. I wanted to take a moment to really thank Ashley for her guidance and introduction to the archives. Once I became the director of Center for Jewish Studies just a few years ago, reading through the mission of the Center for Jewish Studies, which was founded about 43 years ago. That mission includes supporting stewardship of the special collection for Jewish life in Western North Carolina, just beyond that door. And this winter, really it was late fall, was when I realized I could do more perhaps in my role as director, in addition to supporting the archives through an intern, getting it more out into the community. I wanted to also acknowledge Jamie Johnson, who's the assistant superintendent, for supporting me in finding two excellent instructors from Buncombe County Schools. With Susan and Catherine, who you just heard, stepped forward, and they'll be doing the beginning of this work, and it might be something that carries on, I hope, as the archives both grow, we hope, and as they have opportunity to dig in the material there. I also wanted to thank Brandy Bourne, who's the head librarian here, university librarian, I think is the full formal title, who has actually been part of my family life for decades, with her connection where I grew up in Valdez, North Carolina, just down the mountain, and her connection with the Valdez Library, and my father, who used to come into the library every day like clockwork. And the library was across the street from my grandmother's house. So when I was a little kid, I would run across the street. I don't know how many cars. Valdez is a small town. A car is always very exciting. We all just get up on the street. Look, another car. Okay. Maybe there'll be another one next week. And I also want, of course, thank Sharon for her constant guidance and support regarding history here in Jewish life in Western North Carolina. And of course, Paul and Babs for sharing their family stories. And as you can hear, it's just the tip of the iceberg of their larger family stories. And they didn't even share very much of their own stories growing up and the influences that Asheville had, either directly or indirectly. let's see, did I miss anyone? Who did I miss? I think that might be everyone. So I also want to mention a small sort of nonprofit, NADIV, N-A-D-I-V, which is a new philanthropy organization here in Western North Carolina to support Jewish life in Western North Carolina. They're contributing both to this event as well as the summer project, and so I want to be sure to thank them for their support. By intention, this was intended to be a small group of about 20, and at a certain point, it looked like we might have 25 or 30, so I'm actually glad that we were able to get it back down to about 20. My hope is that two things: you'll have a chance to talk to each other before we get kicked out, and two, that you will eat more food and keep talking after we get kicked out and before you leave the library. Please take time to get to know each other tonight, and thank you so much for your time and attention.
Thank you.